Hello there. Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
We are at the, PRSA Digital Impact Conference here in New York City, and I had the great opportunity to meet Philip Sheldrake. And you're from England? London.
Yes.
Great Britain. Excellent. And you're the only British here, right, for the moment?
No, there's a few Brits I've
They
bumped
are?
into, yes.
Okay, and
yeah.
here we met some Danish people as well.
Yeah,
But otherwise, there's most Americans here, right?
Mostly, definitely.
You have written a book.
I have,
Recently.
called the Business of Influence.
The business of influence, and I just would like you to tell us a little bit about this book.
Well, the hypothesis is that the business of influence is broken. Most organisations have a structure, a culture, and policies and processes that were shaped through the 20th century by the tectonic forces, if you like, of 20th century media, 20th century technologies, and 20th century understanding of strategy formulation, development, and execution. Obviously. Except it's 2012, right? And social media and disintermediation has transformed the media landscape unrecognisably. Related technologies such as the semantic web are knocking on the door, the Internet of Things is happening all around us, and business strategy has been transformed. We've moved away from just relying on financial reports, lagging indicators in the words of business performance management, augmenting them with leading indicators of future success. And yet, if you compare an organisation how it works today to how it worked 20 years ago, it's much the same. So what I've been finding is that when I go in and consult to the Global 2000, they say, well, why isn't Facebook gelling for us? Why isn't Twitter gelling for us? And it's often because, excuse the phrase, they've approached it like lipstick on a pig. They haven't transformed the way they work. And yet they have to, because structures are supposed to meet the needs of the business. The culture is supposed to be designed to meet the needs of the business so it can pursue its vision. And yet you get the same titles around the same board table and the same departmental silos that we had 10, 20, 30 years ago. So the opportunity here is to work at usually the strategic business unit level and work out how to transform the structure and the culture, the peoples, the policy and the process in order to make the best use of social web technologies and related technologies.
Who should read this book, do you think? Or buy it?
Well, I'd love people to buy it. Obviously, it's in its second print run already. I'm delighted to say it's going down very well at the universities at the moment. Lots of people who are sort of the title of CMO or head of comms or head of public relations are buying it and feeding back at the moment. It's, I guess, the most interesting piece of feedback I've had about the book so far was, it's not a beach read. And
not a beach read. Wow.
Not a beach read. And I was thinking, well, I didn't write it to be a beach read. The transformation I'm describing is bloody hard work.
Yes.
And therefore it's difficult to write something that's just digestible on a 2-hour flight. It does require a little bit more energy, interest, excitement about the opportunities. So that's what I've written, and so far it seems to be going down extremely well, I'm pleased to say.
Do you think it's, the influence, do you think it's important for people or for peer practitioners in particular? Do you think it's important for them to understand this phenomena?
I think fundamentally there is influence in everything an organisation does, and sometimes in what the organisation doesn't do.
Yes.
I like to look at all the stakeholders, so I'm not necessarily putting customers on a pedestal or employees. It's all stakeholders have to come together in harmony in order to make the organisation rock and roll. So that's what I'm focused on. And yet when I presented to management teams and to boards, sometimes I'd find some of them would actually be using their BlackBerry while I was talking. Outrageous behaviour. But why were they doing that? Because they didn't recognise that someone while I'm a chartered engineer, I came from a public relations background for the last decade, and they didn't see the relevance, so they'd be typing away on their email. And I thought, this isn't good enough. We've got to align the organisation. So I found that the common denominator, if you like, was this idea of influence. Every action having an influence on another individual or group of individuals, because that's universal, and everyone around the table could appreciate that. So I developed what's known as the 6 influence flows, which became like a common songbook, a hymn sheet that everybody could sing off. And then we could start building up the organisational design on the back of that recognition that everyone is responsible for communication, everyone's responsible for reputation, everyone's responsible for how influence goes around, comes around.
That's interesting. What do you think about these people or these tools that's trying to figure out and score and just create score, influence score, like peer index, for example?
Bloody good question.
What do you think that in this perspective of this your theory?
Yeah, I have a very simple definition of influence. Well, actually, I didn't get it. I looked it up in the dictionary. Right, good place to start.
Okay.
And you've been influenced.
Wikipedia or something else, Britannica, right?
You've been influenced when you do something you wouldn't otherwise have done, or when you think something you wouldn't otherwise have thought. If you don't do either of those, there was no influence.
Okay.
Now, there is no scalable, automated way to ascertain when influence has taken place. Therefore, there is no way necessarily to score someone's influence. All the scores like clout, like peer index, people browser, and tracker to a certain extent, although they're a bit more shy of giving an individual a number, and for good cause. All of these scores are scores for that individual, the propensity for that individual's social media contributions to be shared. And that's interesting network analysis.
No.
But don't missell it as a score of someone's influence. And I think part of the conclusion that drops out of my book is that whilst there are such people as influential, and do you know what, if Oprah Winfrey said to everybody, buy Phil Sheldrake's book, I'd sell more, right? She's not going to, of course, it's not quite her genre. But when you recognise the complexity of your marketplace, that doesn't mean that celebrity endorsement or an endorsement of an influential isn't important. It's just in the whole mix of things will lend it considerably less weight than we currently do. So I'm a bit upset about replacing 1990, here's my 20 top journalists, with 2012, here's my, maybe it's 30, maybe it's 40, but that'll do, because I can cope with that number, influentials.
Yeah.
The world is not that
the
simple.
most influential journalist on Twitter, for example. What a crap talk is that?
The world is not that simple. And whilst I love the network science these companies are doing at the moment, and maybe for good revenue reasons, they're slightly mis-selling it, in my opinion.
These PR index and clouds and these score makers, do you think they gives you an idea what influence is all about? Just a slight idea? Or do you think it's completely useless?
I think it could be. I think you need to know what you're dealing with, and if you don't know what you're dealing with, it could be misleading, and you could reach conclusions that are not appropriate for your company's marketing and communications.
But what these guys do is they talking about influence on their websites, right? Influence,
the standard
score,
of influence
blah,
is
blah,
the clout strapline.
And look who's talking. Everybody's using these scores as an measurable for influence, right? That's why people just say this is the most influential people on Twitter.
It's becoming modern parlance, and I realise I'm maybe a lone voice. There are 3 or 4 other people out there who think similarly to me. It's not a score of influence. Hey, not only do we not have a automated, scalable way to ascertain when influence has taken place, full stop, but of course it's a very narrow domain as well. I mean, I'm not on Facebook. I'm a Facebook early adopter. I just didn't like it. And so when you consider that affects my, I'm sure it does, I've not checked, I'm not that interested in it, it affects my clout score, affects my other scores, because they are only working on those very tight domains to try and come up with a number.
Yeah, so, okay, thank you very much, Philip. Please run to, I had the book. Please mention the book again.
It's The Business of Influence.
The Business of Influence by Philip Sheldrake. Okay.
Thank you.
Please, bye.